The Garden Route Biosphere Reserve was born out of the GRI, which was the Garden Route Initiative. And that was a landscape initiative, which was born out of the Cape program about 10 or 11 years ago, who funded quite a bit of money. That money was put to good use in producing a suite of tools which included the fine-scale mapping of the critical vegetation areas of the garden route, along with many, many other things, a stewardship program. There was also a coordinator, and then when the money ran out, it was under the Sandparks jurisdiction, somebody had to keep the boat afloat, and I took it upon myself as an employee of Eden District Municipality to try and sustain the forum as it was going. What we decided then was we became a network of collaborators at that stage, and we were just really sharing really important information at gatherings. And then what we did was we got seed funding to explore future options for the Garden Route Biosphere Reserve. Now, when we embarked on that project and we went around the region asking and interviewing people, we suddenly then realized most of the people were in favor of actually following the routes of having the garden route proclaimed as a biosphere reserve. So this little baby was born and has been growing for about 10 years now. And we are now in the final throes of our application, which has been long and exhausting and very tiring. And we will be ready to submit the application in September, and hold thumbs, we will hopefully have everything in place.
And why were people keen on it? I mean, we've been up there, it's nice, but is it really that special?
I think people were keen on it because we managed somehow to convey to the audience and to the people on the ground and to people on all sorts of different levels the importance of having a biosphere reserve and what the benefits were in having a designated biosphere reserve. And being able to communicate that to people who don't actually understand the concept of the biosphere reserve was very, very challenging. Especially challenging in sort of councillor realms, government official realms. When you mention the word reserve, people automatically just assume it's got to do with plants and it's got to do with animals, and it's a fenced area that is a nature area which is just under conservation. But it's actually not. A biosphere reserve is a completely different concept. A biosphere reserve has got to do with people in living landscapes. A biosphere reserve has got to do with social upliftment. A biosphere reserve has got to do with a lot to do actually with public participation and collaboration, which I feel is the essential ingredient for the success of any biosphere reserve. Yeah.
And why did you get involved? I mean, what was your first interaction with this concept, and why did it draw you?
Initially, I was part of the process of the Horowitz Cluster Biosphere Reserve as a director, and followed that sort of growth and pattern. I realized the worth in having it declared. I realized what the benefits were, and those benefits are very valuable. They truly are valuable if you know the true meaning of what a biosphere stands for. They're valuable in terms of not only protecting the receiving environment of such a rich biodiversity and rich heritage area or region, but certainly in marrying that with sustainable economic growth and tourism and communities who are impoverished and job creation, and being able to uplift and empower communities within the biospheres to utilize resources wisely. And I don't tend to like to use the word sustainable. I like to think of it as responsible. So the value of having a biosphere reserve is based on responsible practices of using our resources in a very sustainable way.
But I mean, in terms of that, is it not a reserve? I mean, is it not a demarcated area where something happens within it and something doesn't happen without it? I mean, outside of it.
A biosphere reserve is a demarcated area, but there are no fences, and there's certainly no boundaries. And you will notice that with many of the biosphere reserves, they're interconnected with each other, particularly in the Cape. And that's a good thing. I don't think any reserve should really, ideally have fences around. Biospheres have to do with core, transition and buffer areas. So within your biosphere, you've got space for development. You've got core areas which are deserved of conservation protection. And then you have buffer areas which, if they need to be used, can be used, but certainly act as a buffer between what is really, really precious and needs to be cared for, as opposed to what needs to be used for agriculture, forestry, and commerce and other economic developments.
So what can a buffer area do that an area outside of the reserve can't do? I mean, if they are just buffer areas, surely any area outside is a natural buffer area.
It would. Any area outside would certainly be a buffer area. But we work within the confines of what we feel is a manageable size. So within our sort of biosphere domain, we have taken, in the case of the garden route, the over 700,000 hectares, we have taken that and produced a map to include buffer areas of importance that we think should remain as important ecological corridors for connectivity in the landscape. So even outside of our biosphere reserve, there will always be buffer areas. I think in proclaiming and designating an area such as the garden route a biosphere reserve, we are just giving more emphasis to the buffer zones and the core areas and the transitional areas and depicting them on a map.
And so what then is the benefit of having a biosphere reserve and not, say, a nature reserve? Because you've got the Tsutsikawa Nature Reserve within it, right? And you have quite a few nature reserves in the if I understand correctly.
Yeah, the Garden Route Biosphere Reserve falls with, at least the Garden Route National Park falls within the Garden Route Biosphere Reserve. And I think it's a very, very similar case scenario to Kruger Two Canyons, with the Kruger National Park under sandparks also falling within the Biosphere Reserve. So what I think the Biosphere Reserve does in essence is add credence to the core areas. So your national parks will form your core areas. Those are the areas under protection. And the other areas around that will be areas of informal protection, like your buffer zones. So yes, it adds value, I think, to any national park, and it certainly adds a lot more viability to fundraising as well. If you are declared UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, you will have a title to be able to generate funding on an international platform and continue with worthwhile projects.
So I'm still quite interested in that moment when you went, okay, so I mean, national parks are obviously something you're quite familiar with, especially working in municipality and reserves and things, but what was that moment when you went, actually a biosphere reserve is the model that we need here, and why?
A lot of research went into looking at what models we wanted to do. Should we pursue the Biosphere Reserve model? Should we not? And it was a team. It was a joint team effort between everybody. I was particularly fond of it because I knew what biospheres. I could see what other biospheres were producing, and I could see where their focus areas were. I just saw real tangible changes happening on the ground, real differences that mattered to people and to animals and to plants and everything that happened within the biosphere. I could just see change happening, and that change encouraged people to become a lot more passionate about what they were doing, and also living more responsibly, making better decisions, and all the rest of it. So there were just such really nice examples that I wanted to actually see happening in the garden route. And I think that's what motivated me to pursue this course of having the garden route declared as well.
And those changes that you want to see, what are those?
The biggest changes I'd like to see in the garden route is a paradigm shift from over-exploitation of our natural resources to wise management. I would like to see sound development practices. I would also like to see a very, very strong emphasis on climate change adaptation and mitigation, as the garden route is one of the most vulnerable areas in the Western Cape in South Africa, prone to droughts, prone to floods. We've got the plans, we've got the strategies in place. But yes, there's a lot of difference. I mean, the poverty level is quite high. Poverty is very high in the garden route. And if we can use projects, or initiate projects at least, to assist people out of the poverty, who live under the poverty line, if we can assist these people to actually empower themselves to create their own businesses, their own unique brandings, their own incomes, then we've made a positive difference. And we are just blessed in the garden route that we've got such a diverse amount of people from all creeds, races, and walks of life, and who deserve that second chance, which I think a Biosphere Reserve can offer them.
True. I mean, how does it offer them?
A Biosphere Reserve will undertake to do some work differently. A Biosphere Reserve will undertake to do certain flagship projects, something that would make its mark felt quite nationally, and is obliged to under the UNESCO regulations and under the reporting structures and guidelines which you need to report to UNESCO in that regard. But yes, you want to initiate projects that are going to make a positive difference. So you can, we've got the eco schools, we've got the blue flag beaches, we've also got alien eradication programs, and all our programs, whether it be EPWP, EPA programs, extended public works programs, the jobs that in the Gouritz cluster, the Jobs for Carbon project, all of these projects add value and meaning to a person's life because it creates jobs. So whatever difference that can make to people within a Biosphere Reserve is a plus, and that is why we want to do that. And then obviously not forgetting that of the natural resources being used, wise utilization of those natural resources is of paramount importance. The garden route is full, as you know, of rich biodiversity. It's got fynbos, it's got renosterveld, it's got thicket, it's got afromontane forest. It's got a plethora of wealth in plant and animal diversity. It's got a huge, robust marine component. And within these biomes, we have to the very, very small little microclimates that cater specifically for a species, one species growth and one species survival. So yes, that we need to look after, and that is the importance of a biosphere, because when we see certain developments that may come across our desk as being irresponsible and not sustainable, a biosphere will give us the teeth to be able to say this is inconsistent with the principles guiding a Biosphere Reserve according to UNESCO, and these sorts of things should not actually be taking place in a biosphere.
Now, in one answer that you've just danced from social to environmental, back to social and environmental, I mean, is the focus of a biosphere more environmental conservation or social, let's call it social conservation?
A biosphere is all-encompassing. It encompasses the triple bottom line approach and the true sustainability model of economic growth, social growth, and all based on natural capital. So it has the triple bottom line approach, and that should be applied right throughout. One cannot separate anything in a Biosphere Reserve from anything else. So you can't say, I have a Biosphere Reserve because I want to look after my plants, or I have a Biosphere Reserve because this community is really suffering and I need to help them, or I want a Biosphere Reserve because I have humpback whales that need protection. It's It's all interconnected, it's all interrelated, and this is the message that only through a robust education and awareness program can a person get that across quite simply and effectively to the general populace.
I just want to ask you, it sounds like you're doing governance work, or that a biosphere does governance work.
I think it's a bit of both. Like a biosphere works for a municipality, I so believe that a municipality should be working for a biosphere. So biospheres need to go into what's called the municipal... I'm in a very fortunate position working for government, because I can inform our integrated development plan and our spatial development framework what is to be aligned according to a biosphere reserve. So when it comes to planning and land use decision making, and also when it comes to project identification, I can steer or make recommendations to our council regarding projects which will be in line with a biosphere reserve. And in doing so, we've made a connection then between local government and the relevance of local government to biosphere reserves.
What is that relevance?
Well, the relevance is there automatically. Every municipality has taxes which they accumulate from taxpayers, and those taxes need to be spent on worthy causes. So they're going to spend them in community projects anyway. They're going to spend them in probably other areas where bulk infrastructure or services or whatever the case might be needed. But I think with a biosphere reserve, being able to inform and being able to assist municipalities with that expenditure and with that budget that they've got, we can actually promote the ideals that are set in the UNESCO regulations, which call on biospheres to embark on these special projects or projects of worth.
So, I mean, this sounds like a really dumb question after what you just said, but I think it's important still. I mean, it sounds like you really feel that biospheres are an asset to a municipality, because a lot of the misconception we've come across, at least, is that it's either competition or it's actually trying to cordon off or take away from municipal work, or try and slow down their growth and slow down the economic activity that happens on the ground by like what we're looking at today, you know, with farmers not being able to use percentages of their land and things. You know, as a municipality, I can imagine that many feel that, oh no, this is a threat to how well we can operate.
Yeah, look, you know, I think a person would have to understand the dynamics of each municipality and how each municipality is communicating within its biosphere, and how open those communication channels are, and whether there are proper dialogues that are taking place between the biosphere and the municipalities and local government, as well as with provincial and national government. Those dialogues need to be open and fully transparent, and I think a degree of trust and a degree of faith needs to be placed in each other. And gap analysis is what's actually needed to see exactly where a biosphere can assist municipalities in their work, because biospheres consist of champions who are not normally paid for their work, it's voluntary, whereas municipal officials have certain key performance targets that they need to meet. So in joining hands, really, they are both actually gaining, because they are not only opening the communication channels, but they are actually pooling their resources, which is of vital necessity to the survival and growth of a municipality, as well as the survival and growth of a biosphere.